Hi, everyone. I think we're going to start around 6:15, so continue talking. And a few minutes, yeah.
Would I be able to just set this mic up here and capture some sound?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, okay. Thank you.
Sure.
No.
No, you are. I'm just going to let's.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Matthew Givens. I'm a volunteer with Via Rio Grande. I'm actually an aerospace engineer by trade, and that kind of shows you that we come from all sorts of different professional backgrounds and not really related to this. We just do this for the love of our city. Via Rio Grande advocates for the Rio Grande Plan, which, if you haven't heard of it, kind of the purpose of this event is to get you up to speed on what it is. When the city kicks off its Reconnecting Communities study soon, and that's not necessarily about the Rio Grande Plan, but it is. The Rio Grande Plan is part of that, and so we have a few really good speakers tonight. The first one is Dan Dugan. He's going to kick us off, Councilmember Dan Dugan. And then we have Christian Lenhart, who is the author of the plan originally, about 4 years ago now. And then we have Julianne Sabula from Salt Lake City Transportation. And then Alejandro Puy from the Salt Lake City Council. And then after that, we're going to transition to some Q&A, and then kind of let everybody start mingling and talking, and hopefully we all learn something today. So with that, I'll give it to Councilmember Dan Dugan.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. It's great to be here. It's great to be on the west side of Salt Lake City and also kind of look at the big vision here. I'm going to step back in time and use the term, at the turn of the century, tracks and front runner was a big deal. The Rio Grande Plan takes it to the next step and connected a little bit east and west, but mostly from the freeway east. This plan will take down that wall and connect the west from the east so that all modes of transportation can flow easily across the city. And that's a big deal. It's big, it's bold, it's transformative. And that's what we need in this city to connect the city and make it one whole city. I think there's a number of us who can really imagine what those benefits are, but I'll have to add there's benefits that are past our imagination or beyond our imagination. Just like any big, bold, transformative things, we can't even imagine how big that is for a city to do. It was designed, as Matt said, by two individuals, Christian and Cameron, 4 years ago, on their own dime, on their own time. And I love it. And I think we're all going to love it. It will change things, but I think it's a great plan starting forward. Now I want to step back 1 second. The Transportation Department has a process. And process one is getting funding to do a study of what we want to do. And then process step two is implementing that study, taking that study, looking at proposals, and then implementing a proposal. We kind of skipped step one and said, hey, we want to look at step two and say, hey, we got a great proposal, we want to go forward. So we do still have to do a reconnecting community study. We got the grant funding, we got a couple $2 million to do that. The UDOT with the city is just initiated the RFP to solicit for the contractor for that RFP deal because there's money, federal money on the table to help us reconnect the east and the west. This plan will connect a portion of it. The study is looking to connect, I'm going from 2100 South all the way to the North Temple. So, or not North Temple, to the North Salt Lake. So how do we connect this whole thing? It's a bold plan, and I'm going to really turn it right now over to the architect of the plan, Christian. So thank you very much.
Hello everyone, I'm Christian Linhart. I am a resident of Salt Lake City. I live near Liberty Park, and I will take credit just so far as saying I'm one of the original co-authors of the Rio Grande Plan. But what it's become it's become so much bigger than just the paper and other things that we first talked about back in 2020. The group that I'm with, Via Rio Grande, have so many members, from Matt and Nate and Fred and everyone else. We've been doing our hardest to incorporate all public feedback we get to try and make this a much better plan that fits the community. And so I really do consider this everyone in Salt Lake City that we've met and talked with. That's going to be part of what we do tonight. But before that, I'm just going to step through some slides. I know slides. We'll do it as quickly as we can, just to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about as far as the Rio Grande Plan and why our organization is called Via Rio Grande. So on the screen behind me, we have the Rio Grande Plan. And how are we going to do this? Should I? Okay, all right, well, next slide. I'm not sure we're going to go through all these meeting goals right now. Next slide, please. So the situation that greets us in Salt Lake City is that we have our mainline railroad lines. They run along the west side of downtown. These are big, full-sized, often very fast, often very long trains. A lot of them are UTA commuter trains. They go a lot faster than people are expecting. There's close calls every other month or so. Since we started talking about this plan, there's fatalities every single year that we've been talking about the plan, and that disrupts rail service, less reliable way to get around. The freight trains are another story completely. The average length of a Union Pacific freight train has recently just passed 2 miles long. That's the average length. And these are trains that are entering the freight yards that are not made for this. It takes them a long time. Our freight railroad yards are close to downtown. The inland port is close to downtown. So all the rail traffic concentrated in the state of Utah gets pushed through these tracks right through downtown. Crossings are going to be blocked for dozens of minutes at a time, and it can really cut off access. Because of this unreliability of having the roads open or closed, the UTA does not run buses on roads that have mainline railroad crossings. So the popular bus routes on 2nd South and 9 South, the 2 and the 9 buses, they stop at the railroad tracks. They do not continue on to the west side, where there's a lot more people that need to go east and west, but the buses can't do it because the route is not reliable. School buses have their own issues. Kids getting to school have their own issues as well. The pedestrian bridge that was recently opened up is on this. Alternatives are not necessarily solutions. There's a difference there. It's treating the symptoms versus treating the cause. Next slide, please. Another issue that we have in Salt Lake City is that because we've moved all our railroad tracks to the west side of downtown and consolidated, we don't have access to a main central station anymore. Around the country, you have great American railroad stations from the golden age of trains. There's several behind me from New York to Cincinnati. Our neighbor city, Denver, is on there. They have a fantastic train station. Every city in the United States has an airport, but capital cities, they have train stations too. Our train station, next slide, at present looks like this. This was meant as a temporary measure, and as part of the consolidating of the rail lines through downtown for the last Olympics, it got moved over to the far west side of downtown. And that move made sense at the time. But the trouble is that as of last month, it's been 25 years since passenger stations have been moved to this location, and it's looked like this for essentially the last quarter century. And that's a problem. Infuriating to have this be our problem when we do have, next slide. That's what it looks like. More of that. Next slide, please. When we have a train station here in downtown, we actually have two. We have our choice between them. My favorite is the Rio Grande Depot. It's a slightly bigger station. It's got an amazing history attached to it of golden age and gilded age glamour to it that other train stations don't have. The interior of the station, the Great Hall, is actually roughly about the same size as it is in Denver. This is a much bigger and grander train station than Salt Lake City really warranted at the time. The fact that we have it still after all these years and that it wasn't demolished, that it wasn't torn down or even just cut into pieces is just an amazing piece of good fortune for us. And it's just sitting there waiting for us to do something with it again. After the repairs are made to it, the repairs from the earthquake in 2020, the building, it's still owned by the state, is not going to have an official designated use. The historical department that has been using it is getting new office space up on Capitol Hill, and it's uncertain what the train station will be used for. And we feel very strongly that the proper use of a train station is for trains. Next slide. So the situation viewed from above. In pink, we have the existing rail corridors. They've been consolidated to the west side of downtown. They've been pushed over, shoved as far as they can, so that's why they're all curvy and slow. That doesn't help getting freight trains through here at all because the speeds are just not so great. In white, we've got the I-15, and in black, we have the historic rail corridor of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. The Rio Grande Plan proposes that we return tracks to 500 West, the historic corridor. The space is there for it. The right-of-way is open. It goes straight up to the North Temple Station. If we put the tracks there, then we can reuse the Rio Grande Depot as our main central transit hub and have a grand train station for Salt Lake City and for Utah and for the Wasatch Front in general. By going to that, we can close all the existing crossings, all of them. They won't be a problem anymore. And not just that you have to go over or under, they will be gone. There is no tracks there. Like the 400 South Bridge, that would be eliminated. It would be a flat road out to the west side, out to Jordan River and beyond. All the issues that are involved in going up and over, it wouldn't be an issue anymore. We can really clean up a lot of the messy and additive infrastructure that's been just put together piece by piece. And then with the tracks gone, one more time on the train box, we can, one more, railroad yards, by freeway overpasses, and by exit ramps, we can turn that into city again. We can restore the street grid. There's about 50 to 75 acres of land beneath either the railroad tracks or immediately adjacent. That is an enormous amount of land. That is enough to, the recent study that was done by Kimley Horn, paid for by Salt Lake City, estimates that the value of the land would go up from a negligible amount, just a couple $1 million, to over $2 billion in value just by doing this. This is how you not only rebuild a city, this is how you pay for the Rio Grande train box at all. Putting the trains back on 500 West would be complicated because it's a street, except that our proposal is to put them below the street level. Here you have a little GIF in the corner there. You can see the train is moving through the city of Reno, Nevada. Again, another neighbor city of ours. Denver built a great train station. Reno built a great grade separation project. These are our neighbor cities. We can do the same sort of project too. It's not out of scope for our city. But you can see how the freight train moves slowly through downtown, but traffic continues to pass. Pedestrians continue to walk by for cars, but also for public transit of all kinds. Next. And of course, at the center of this all is the Rio Grande Depot. While Salt Lake City's, the current Salt Lake Central Station is accessible only from the east, this is a station that would be accessible from 360 degrees all the way around, no matter what area your business or your new residences come from. They all have access to that grand train station. Next, please. So that's the economic benefits of what you can do with between 50 and potentially a few hundred acres of newly accessible land that's now gone from being undesirable parcels next to a freeway, next to railroad yards. Now it's next to a grand train station, one of the best that America has to offer. And it increases the value of the properties, and it doesn't spill over. and gentrify areas that people already live in, because it is right now unused and less used space. Next, please. Yeah, we have some people who do good renderings, and they do our best to. Yeah, we did try and include Salt Lake Central Station in there. Next, please. Let's just step through the Denver, a few more slides just to show the comparison project. So this is Denver. Denver had a similar situation to ours. We're on the west side or north side of their downtown. They had 24 acres of former rail yards and industrial space. And not only was that unused, but it was causing problems for downtown development. You know, who wants to build up to rail yards and undeveloped space? That's where it doesn't have the best reputation part of town. But by redeveloping that, by building what they have, an underground bus station and an at-grade rail station, we would do the similar thing except underground rail station and at-grade bus station. And it takes all that value of that land, and they used something called transportation improvement bonds. So they had to repay the cost of the project, but they repaid their bonds early. That's how much development potential they unlocked. It paid for itself literally faster than schedule. Next, please. And that's the before picture. You can see, yeah, all those skyscrapers that exist now, at the beginning of this century, it was dirt fields. Next, please. And there's, of course, Reno, Nevada. Little Reno, they have a train box, or a train trench. We're calling it a train box. Theirs is about 2 miles long. It goes from one side of town to the other. It's right next to the Truckee River. They have the same sort of issues that we have as far as geotechnical and water table issues. At the beginning of the century, about 2005, they built this 2 mile long trench under where the tracks were existing. It was a major project. They got it done, and now downtown is reconnected in a way that it hasn't been ever since 1860s when the railroad first came through. Next, please. Los Angeles. They have a similar problem with their ports. We have an inland port. They have a seaport. Their port has the tracks go right next to downtown Los Angeles and through the Alameda neighborhood. They created something called the Alameda Corridor. It's a 20-mile long new railroad line, 3 tracks, and 10 mile of those are underground in this box. 10 miles. They eliminated literally dozens of railroad crossings where trains had to creep through slowly downtown, stopping the community and often put on their emergency brakes as cars get out of the way. It's now not a problem. The trains zoom through downtown. The railroads love it. The people love it. It's creating new space. And so instead of fighting over the existing space, there's new space. Everyone can have their own space. It's like giving twin brothers their own rooms to live in. There's just no fighting anymore. Next, please. And that's the end goal of this, is to have a railroad station that represents our best aspirations as Utahns and as residents of Salt Lake City. Something that we can rally around and be proud of. If the Olympics are coming back, then this would be something to say that our the project last time for the last Olympics, 2002, was building big freeways and getting rid of the train station. For 2034, it could be that we put the tracks back and make transit our priority again. And just to speak a little called Via Rio Grande. The easiest way to think is, what happens if we don't build the Rio Grande Plan? What if we develop along the same trajectory that we are right now? What's going to happen? We will still continue to develop, Salt Lake City will continue to grow, but it will be different. Less people take public transit. The city will just be different in the way that it reaches its potential. The freight train issue isn't going to go away. It's going to get worse. The whole goal of the Inland Port Authority is to move as much freight from trucks onto trains, and that's really good, except for us, because we have to deal with the railroad crossing issue. I said before that there's already hundreds of activation events every single day where the gates go down and block. There's going to be maybe 1,000 in the future as more and more trains keep coming through. It's already in the long-range plans to grade separate these, but the usual way we do it now, and we know how this works, we've seen this before, each project is taken one at a time. We'll have a study about 200 south, maybe a different study about 800 south or 600 west, one at a time. We'll have to have periods of public comment. We'll have to raise funds. We'll have to raise awareness. It'll be a fight for every single one of these railroad crossings. If you do it one at a time, there's no way you can get them down. So for each individual railroad crossing, there's only one thing you can do. You can move the road. Can you move it up so that people have to climb up high on these concrete freeway being where it is? The answer most commonly is going to be build a hole, the hole for the people to go through. and a hole through the ground, an underpass that is not well maintained, not well lit, not well policed, that can be a bigger barrier for people than a blocked crossing for freight trains. If you want to have grade separations, not just bridges and overpasses, but if you want to move the tracks instead of the road, if you want the trains to accommodate the people instead of the people to accommodate the trains, it starts at the Rio Grande Depot. It starts with the station. That's the vision. From there, we can go through the train box. We can have all the crossings eliminated at once. This isn't something we're going to have to spend the rest of our lives fighting. This is going to be one and done. Do you want a walkable city? A city where people can get around on foot? It's impressive to me that the sidewalk infrastructure is not so great. Even just across the street from Salt Lake Central Station, there's no sidewalk. You'd think that the main transit hub, the biggest transit hub, is just in the wrong part of town. From there, you get on another bus, you get on another train, you get in a van. There's just no way you can walk from that station. You have to get someplace else. And as a net result, it slows everyone down. The Rio Grande Depot is a quarter mile closer to downtown. That's a big difference. That's the usual distance the average person in the public is willing to walk to get to a destination. From the Rio Grande Depot, you can get to Pioneer Park, you can get to the Delta Center, you can get to the Gateway, you can get to the Convention Center. You can do it all on foot. You don't have to wait for another mode of transit. You can have people walking through the city again. Street life will be increased. If you want to have street life again, it starts at the station. It starts at the Rio Grande Depot. Do you want housing? Enough housing for everyone? Housing prices are crazy because there's not enough supply. Is there any housing around Salt Lake Central Station? There isn't. It's been there for a quarter of a century. I think we've spent enough time running this experiment. People don't want to live next to it. And why not? It's not that that people don't like transit. It's that it's next to the freeway. Literally, the freeway overshadows it, casts shadows on the train station. Freeways are loud. Freeways are noisy. They pollute. There's always traffic congestion next to the freeway. It's traffic. If you want to have enough space to open up, and not just open up for next to the freeway, you're going to have space that opens up next to one of the greatest train stations in America, the Rio Grande Depot. A train will pass through every couple minutes to get where you need to go. It's going to be a place where people want to build around. It's going to be a place that people want to have a neighborhood in. If you want more housing and you want transit-focused neighborhood, it starts at the Rio Grande Depot. And there's a few people here who just like trains. I started out as one of these. I'm a train guy. There's been proposals for a very long time to have passenger trains go to different places. Boise, south to Las Vegas, Southern California, maybe another route over to Denver, a different route, or even just throughout Utah, a state-run network, out to Moab or Cedar City, that sort of thing. And we have the population for it. Believe it or not, I-15 is it's the 20th busiest freeway section in the United States. It is huge. The traffic capacity on that thing that it carries every day is impressive. If you were to take 1% of those cars and put them onto a train, just say south to southern Utah, that would be the 6th busiest Amtrak route by ridership. Just all the transportation. Everything is subsidized, from airlines to highways to everything else. It doesn't matter to them what they're paying for, trains or for airplanes or anything else. It matters what their constituents tell them they want. It starts with the Rio Grande Depot here too. Look at the most recent Amtrak route that was established, the Aurora in Minneapolis, St. Paul. They reorganized, they restored the St. Paul Union Station first. And the business owners loved it. So they crowded around. They said, we need more service to this depot. We need more people coming through for our business. And suddenly, the funding was available. If you want more trains, it works backwards now. It starts at the train station, not at the train. Then, of course, you'll get all the people who, the citizens who want train traffic, who want people near in their neighborhood, then they will support the train. But it starts at this train station first. And I could keep going on and on like this. Public transit usage, bicycle infrastructure, economic development. It starts with the vision of the Rio Grande Depot. So if you want a city that you can be proud of, it starts here. And that's why we can have one city united via Rio Grande. Thank you.
Hello, this is a big crowd. My name is Julianne Cebula. I work for the Salt Lake City Transportation Division, and I appreciate the time to just spend a few minutes. I won't take too much of your time. Bureaucrats are boring. But I just wanted to share with you a couple thoughts. One is that I love that this is happening. I feel like bottom-up planning is the ideal whenever you can get it. And so having people that have the enthusiasm, the vision, the time, the skills, the knowledge, all of those things that we see reflected in this type of plan, it's awesome. So I'm super excited about that. But as a bureaucrat, I have to go through a planning process, and Christian described a little bit of that. I'm actually here on behalf of Joe Taylor, who's going to be running a study on the very topic of this divide, of the railroad tracks, of the freeway, and looking at what it has done to our community historically. It's funded by a federal grant program that was conceived really about tearing down freeways, and in places that has happened remarkably. But really we're going into this, the basic tenet of planning is that you ask questions and then you find answers. And so what we initially need to do is talk to the community, explore what are the problems we're trying to solve, because this is an infrastructure problem for sure. It is also an operational problem in terms of trains. They're getting, they're 3 miles long now. And more of them are that long. And, the railroads are seeking to do that more and more. You're paying one operator, but more stuff is getting moved. So how do we cope with that as an urbanized area that has this sort of cutting through the community? But beyond that, there's also just a pretty long history. Redlining and real estate practices in the United States has a huge impact to this day on the historical acquired wealth of families, and really has reinforced racism in a pretty extensive but largely invisible way for many of us. And so thinking about this as not only a physical divide but also a psychological divide, I think is really important to understand. It's not something that I understand because it's not something that affected my life growing up or the life of my parents or their parents. But there are lots of people out there who have been impacted, and so our goal is to talk to those people and say, tell us the problem from your perspective that we're trying to solve. Tell us the goals that you are trying to achieve. And then we can start exploring what are all the alternatives that might do that. This might be one of them. And so we'll ask the questions. Hopefully we'll learn a whole lot in the beginning of our study. As Councilmember Dugan mentioned, we're going to be selecting a consultant to help us with this effort shortly, and off and running. But a big part of the front end of the study is going to be talking with the community, building trust, right? So the city is agnostic on this particular solution because we just don't know yet on the basis of the study. And we really need to go into it with an authentic curiosity to say, tell us what we need to know, because then we can apply technical expertise to those things. So that's what we're going to do. We'll hopefully come up with a whole universe of alternatives. The standard process does that, and a lot of them fall off right out of the gate for various reasons. We're probably not going to build a series of slingshots to shoot people across the rails. We could, you don't know. But we'll look. Yes. There's a lot, right? And we want that. We want to hear what everyone has in terms of ideas, both in terms of the problem and how it's defined, but also potential solutions and just how we all collectively envision our community coming together, reconnecting, and what solutions might provide that. And then the study will filter and filter and filter until we get down to a couple of things. If I had to read the tea leaves, I would guess that we'll have some near-term options, some things that we can do in the short term that are hopefully helpful sooner than later. But I also think that we're going to come away with some things that are big transformational projects. Perhaps this one and 5 others, perhaps, something completely different. And we'll see when that comes, what it takes. And that's always the sort of the rub. So where is the funding? What are all of the technical challenges? You know, public utilities under the ground. We don't think about our sewers and water lines until they don't work, but they're there and they're underground, and so we have to think about that. And how do we reroute them if we're going to do something that goes underground, as an example? So those types of things we can explore, but we won't get there until we actually have some solutions on the table that are rising to the top, potential phasing and implementation. And so one of our staff members, Joe Taylor, who is just phenomenal at this sort of analysis, and in particular, he has excellent listening skills. I think probably the most important part of doing a project like this. He'll be running the project. He's actually right now in Philadelphia at the Reconnecting Communities Summit. I heard it was phenomenal last year. I hope it is again this year. If you want to search around for news coverage, hopefully you'll get inspired as well. But this plan, I'm excited to see the community rallying around visionary ideas, thanks to trained nerds like myself. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alejandro. For those that are here on the west side, maybe not very often, you survived crossing the trains and you made it in time here. So I'm sure that for us that live on this side of the tracks, we always, the trains shape our lives and influence our lives often in a negative way. And I represent this part of town on the city council with Dan Dugan, who is the one that dreams big in our council here in our city. And I want to tell you very quickly that it is always strange to have a community-driven project of this magnitude, right? And then you also have all the layers of government that this touches, and it touches all the layers of government, and even some that I don't even know. And this is why things like this are complicated. If this was a decision that Salt Lake City could make alone, I think you probably have the votes already to make that happen, but we can't. Now, could we be part of pushing an idea or helping shape it or helping, add more, energy to it? Yes. And, Dan has been an incredible ally to this issue to make sure that it keeps in our forefront. Now, not to be a wet blanket, because I'm going to give you some chores at the end, and again, some thoughts that I think it could be useful for all of you that care about this project. But again, layers of government, quasi-governmental organizations involved also. Inland Port is a quasi-governmental organization. They run almost as its own government entity. They have taxing authority. They have all sorts of things that we don't like as a city, but there was a lawsuit. We lost it, by the way. But the state of Utah loves creating these sort of layers of government where it removes authority from special municipalities. And they created one of those. There is also private companies. There is one in particular, but there are other ones that are touching on this. And how do they also have property rights, and they have contracts, and they have agreements. There is also agreements about the train tracks itself, that the companies sign with each other to be able to use the tracks at certain times or not. So all of these things are incredibly, and there was one that I didn't think about, which is a very obvious one, but utilities. And some people think that utilities are very easy to manage, and I can tell you that I have learned more about utilities that I can think of. And putting a sewage line that one of my neighbors, and maybe some of them are here, just a block from here in a part of our town that doesn't have sewage and they have septic tanks, has become almost impossible because of the grade and all these complications that are in the area. So there is a lot of complications. Now, that doesn't seem exciting right now. Again, don't get disappointed and things like this big take a while, I want you to keep pushing. And how could you make a difference about this is keep making noise. And certainly, I see some of you that keep making noise a lot, but keep making that noise. It's a good noise. Keep talking to everybody that you know, between your own communities. But also keep talking to decision makers. Talk to the legislators at the Hill here, but also learn about what they care about, right? If you're talking about walkability, again, there are some good people in the Hill, but many of them might not necessarily care about walkability, but they might care about the financial impact to the state and how could a project like this could be useful for the state. When you talked with the Inland Port, and you probably should also reach out to the Inland Port Board, you talk about the freight trains and how could they be more efficient so they go faster, they can move product faster. When you're talking to our federal delegation, you should talk to our federal delegation too. Make sure that they understand that Utah deserves this sort of investment. Put them to find us money. That's their job, really. I mean, that's really what they do there, is try to find the city of Utah money. When you're talking to our city, make sure that we submit our grants in time and that we actually put in our studies, and we look into these options and see if we can frame it in a way that looks into projects of this magnitude. So these are the things that you could do. And, again, understanding that we all have different perspectives about how these projects affect us. To be sincere, I don't know if you follow, but I've been doing a campaign about trains for over a year now, and working with trying to highlight how impactful trains are in our community. And I got hundreds of stories from my neighbors that range from missing a concert, missing a job interview, or giving birth outside a block crossing. So the range of impacts in my community is huge, and you have to live in this community to know it. This project is a fantastic dream, and I want to make it happen too. I am committed to move the needle. Now, when we're talking about quickly about the symptoms and trying to mitigate those symptoms, I need to keep on fighting for mitigating the symptoms, because projects like this will take a while, and they are going to need a lot of money, and hopefully we'll find it. But I still need to mitigate the symptoms because I don't want more babies being born next to the train tracks. I don't want anybody or my neighbors losing their jobs or paying more in childcare because they were late picking up their kids. So I need to still work on this, on the smaller things to make my neighbors' lives better. Now, doesn't mean that I don't want the gigantic dreamy thing to happen. No, I really still do. So I also need your help. And how could you help us on this project too is reporting blocked crossings. And all of you in your phones, you could Google right now, and I would have given you the link if it was an easy link, but they don't make these things very easy, unfortunately. But if you search for report blocked crossings, train crossings, the Federal Rail Administration has a website that you can click on it, and you can it will GPS you where you are and show you the block crossings that is near you. And if you are driving or you're walking or biking or in skateboard or whatever else you're doing, and you have a train in front of you, report it. Why is that important? It's because they use this data to know if these trains are affecting us, as if they weren't. I have talked to Union Pacific. I traveled a few months ago to Omaha to force a conversation with them. They didn't open the door. It's a very pretty building, by the way. I ended up using that as an opportunity to meet with them, and they actually did set up a meeting. And they showed me the numbers. No one complains. So therefore, there is no problems. From their perspective and from the Federal Rail Administration, no one has issues with trains here in Utah and Salt Lake. In Ogden, they have one incident where they have several people complaining, and the federal government put some money to improve a crossing. No one is complaining. So I need you to report those train crossings every time you see one. Tell your friends about that, because it helps This argument that the trains are changing our way of life, those long 2-mile trains that can get to 3 miles very soon, I am not kidding how long those are, and they stop in the train tracks and they frustrate the hell out of all of us. We need to report it. This is the task that I'm asking you to do. Obviously, there is a lot of other tasks that those proponents of Rio Grande are asking, but this is how you can help, in my view, to push for this too. So thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks to all the speakers. I think we're going to do some Q&A now. So could we get all the speakers, if they're still here, to come up? And we have a microphone. And if we want to make a line at the microphone, that'd be great. We'll pass this one around.
We should make this more casual sort of thing, too. We should have the back doors probably be open now, and people can come and go. And over here. All right. Yeah, we've got a bunch of things outside, as in posters or flyers, other promotional material, and even snacks. There's more snacks out there. So let's, Fred. This is Fred Jenny. He's our Director of Outreach.
Yeah, Director of Engagement. I just, real quick, sorry to jump in before the Q&A. I want to remind everybody that in order to make this happen, yes, reporting block crossings is paramount, but also so is writing your elected officials. And right now, our two main ones that we're looking at trying to get on board, Mayor Mendenhall and Wasatch Front Regional Council. What we've been told is Wasatch Front Regional Council decides the transportation projects within the Wasatch Front all the way down to Utah County. So in order to get this on the radar of the legislator, on the radar of everybody and the federal government, we need them on board. So we have a lot of postcards out there. They also have stuff online. You can find all of that on our link tree, which is in our Instagram. So really appreciate everybody being here and on the website, of course. But now I'll let everybody get back to the Q&A.
Is this all right? Hey everyone, wow, this is incredible to see everyone here. It was just this summer I met Fred and the Via Rio Grande team at the Stadler open house. I don't know how exactly I came across Via Rio Grande. I think it was a viral Instagram reel that Fred made, and I was like, oh, this looks interesting. I moved here 3 years ago from California, and living in downtown Salt Lake City, I became a bit of an urbanist. I really love the tracks and the urban lifestyle, walking. I ride my electric scooter everywhere. My question is, given that I've only had insight into this project for less than maybe 4 or 5 months now, being someone that's been involved from the beginning, how would you say the project has been advancing? It feels like it's gaining a lot of momentum. I mean, just look at everyone here. But in your perspective, how would you say the progress of the project has come so far? Thank you.
Ooh, okay. I guess the briefest of histories, the very first pitch for the Rio Grande Plan was by me and Cameron on a webcast, because it was 2021. People were still doing this for COVID, a web meeting, a Zoom meeting with Nick Norris, who's a director of planning in Salt Lake City. And he thankfully didn't laugh at us. He gave us a bunch of very good pointers, and we redid the way that we were presenting our plan, and he also got us connected with the Salt Lake City Council. Our original fault was that we were too much transit nerds. We were saying, you can increase the efficiency of this route by this, and then you get this much higher ridership. And the city council looked at us and they said, well, you can also close the public crossings, right? And we said, yeah, of course, but you can also get more people on the trains. And they said, stop, you can close the railroad crossings. We said, yes, we can also close the railroad crossings. And from there, this became a much bigger thing than just a train nerd's idea for making things more efficient. This became a real improvement to the community effort. So presented to the Salt Lake City Council, presented to the mayor, we've discussed, we've had more people come to each and every meeting, yes. We've also had more response from elected officials. The city council either authorized or the mayor authorized the study from the Kimley Horn to see if this was actually feasible. Turns out, yes, it is. Good, check. They also applied for federal money to have the Connected Community Study, and that's ongoing now. And this is when we really need to have public outreach for that study. And this is when it's important that we have people like Fred Jenny, who's running our Instagram, or other people who are keeping our website up and running. Because, yeah, I feel like things are picking up slow and steady speed. And it is my philosophy that anything that's done quickly can be undone quickly. I really like that it's taken slow, deliberate steps to get where we are now, and that it's lasted this long and people still haven't found a fatal flaw with it is very encouraging. So, should we raise hands or should we have people line up at the front? Yes, sir.
Sorry, sir. Real quick on that. Yeah, these processes and these programs take a long time, and they have to go through that process that Julianne mentioned. And the city and the organization that runs the study has to be agnostic to it. They have to look at all options and all things. And in this study, the Rio Grande Plan, we took basically a section of the full east-west connection. So that's why it's important that the city looks at the whole. Gotcha. Thank you. So looks like the city looks at the whole connection, east and west. This is a big one, but that looks at that, and it does take time. And that it's, as Christian said, it is frustrating because we move slow, but it's also important that we do it right and we move also deliberately throughout the communication. So the ears and listening to the community is so important up front. So thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Dan Posilovich. I'm a property owner in the neighborhood. And I'm here tonight to make the group here aware of some of the concerns that exist. I'm really impressed with your desire to underground the tracks. I think that's a great idea. It's been done throughout the world for many decades, centuries, and it should be done. My concern is that you're proposing to relocate it onto 500 West, which is an old kind of 60s redlining, block busting, where urban planners would go ahead and put a transportation corridor right down the middle of a neighborhood. That's a thriving neighborhood. And what you're proposing to do now is take over 100 properties, and along with that, kill many businesses, harm those businesses unnecessarily. You can underground in place. When you say historic, you're being somewhat, playing with the facts. 600 West also is historic north and south Union Pacific right away, and it could stay there. So that is what I recommend you do. Instead of creating this relocation situation, you're going to get a lot of political pushback, and this is a project that needs to be sold politically. Why develop these kinds of issues? Councilperson Petra on Monday went on record, the Tribune, saying absolutely no displacement at all of any businesses. And here you're proposing to take over 100 properties. So the other problem you're having now is by proposing this, you're creating this kind of redlining fear that existed in the 60s that you mentioned, where lenders will not lend on properties that are under the threat of eminent domain. Buyers will not buy properties under the threat of eminent domain. Businesses that are there will not invest in their business because they're going to lose their business possibly. All of these things create this unfortunate, unnecessary harm. And I think you should look at this in a positive way where we want to minimize the harm to the neighborhood. With that, I think you're going to make much more political process. I know you guys are engineers, and engineers think in a very limited way. But this is more than that. The community has to also be heard. And the majority of the property owners along 500 West are against this. I've talked to them. I'm a major property owner. Excuse me? Do you own on 500 West? I own property from 800 South to 1200 South. They're going to take, I own on one side of the street for one block, on two sides of the street for another block, and the rest of it I own both sides, and they're going to actually take my property. That's what they're doing. So I think you should go ahead and redesign the plan to underground in place. You will minimize the threat, the harm, the confusion that's happening to businesses now, over 100 businesses. Originally, when you did the plan 4 years ago, you said, oh, no eminent domain, no taking. This plan now, all of a sudden, is over 100 properties. That, I think, is wrong, and I think you should change your ways now and avoid all of the harm you're causing to people that own property along that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, and I appreciate the comment. And also, because we are doing the study, the East-West Connection, the Connecting Community Study, the city and UDOT is leading that study. They're going through that study and they're looking at all these different avenues. They're going to take this plan, they can dissect this plan, and they can do this. So the idea here is this was a community-led proposal. It's going to go there just like any other community-led proposal on how to reconnect the East and the West communities. This plan is by no way set in stone. This plan is right now not taking anything away from the eminent domain. It is a proposal to...
The proposal causes the harm, Councilman Dugan, by people not knowing what's going to happen, by worrying about this happening, even though you say planners are going to look at it and think about it, them worrying, a lender is going to say, look, I don't want to lend on this property because...
Okay, so how much value could your property... Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, so hold on, sir. The gentleman has the floor. I understand your questions. We can take that as under advisement. But I'm also saying that the city is going through it with UDOT going through the study. So we can look at our plan, but we also understand that there's a study going on here.
Well,
but I appreciate the comments because
go ahead and change your program such where you underground in place.
So. We can look at that, but we also know
that should be your preferred route.
Understand, okay, understand, sir, and we can take that, and we also know that your comments will be well taken from the study itself. Who is going to be a third party outside of us?
You're missing my point. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Yeah, please.
Right. Hi, my name is Isaac Rogers. I've lived in Salt Lake City for about 11 years now. And keep in mind, I'm very young. I was about 11 years old when I moved here. Anyway, so I remember something that happened at Salt Lake Central, which is basically one of the reasons why I really want the Rio Grande Plan to happen. So we all know Salt Lake Central lacks shelter and water and, let's see, like bus service. Yeah, it lacks pretty much everything. Anyway, so, oh yeah, one more concern. I remember when my girlfriend was visiting, her dad told her to never get off at Salt Lake Central because that's where the homeless hang out at like in the evening. And I remember one time her front runner train got terminated at Salt Lake Central and a homeless guy actually asked her for money and she called me immediately. And hopefully this Rio Grande Plan thing will maybe solve the homeless situation.
Thank you for the comment. Appreciate that. Any other comments or questions? Just go ahead and come on up.
Yes, maybe this is. I am Will, working with Joe as a liaison, just as a school thing for the Reconnecting Communities project to the West Side Spanish-speaking community, and a couple of questions. First, if the rail yards are underutilized, why haven't tracks been removed already? What is the continued presence of a lot of the rail tracks? And the second one is that a lot of real estate by the interstate highway on other parts. I guess it's also near the north-south train route, but not necessarily near train yards. Is also primarily industrial use because, from what I've learned, that residents' quality of life, there are several health issues with living that close to a freeway. So how are you going to kind of take care of that problem? Because ultimately, a lot of the plan still revolves around building up stuff around the freeway. and that's a barrier that'll continue to exist even if the rail barrier doesn't. So that's a couple questions that the first is, of course, what about the road barrier, and the second is about why not just kind of rearrange the rail yard at ground level.
I guess the first question, why the tracks are still there if they are underutilized. And that's just, there's several reasons why a railroad would keep its steel rails in place where they aren't using them anymore. There's always the possibility that they could use it again. Rail car storage is a thing where you just take cars that aren't being used and put them in rail yards that aren't being used. You'll see that a lot in other yards, specifically locomotives on the north end. Also, it's just a hold property sometimes. And honestly, with Union Pacific Railroad, a lot of the times it's just that they're a big company with very few people running it, and they have better things to do than remove things that are not causing them trouble at the time. You can go out there and count how many rail cars are kept in the tracks, and it's, traffic patterns have just changed anyway from the short, small, warehouse-focused yards that are there to the big ones outside. So anyway, we can talk about train stuff later. They are underutilized, and there's unknown reasons why the tracks are still there. But as for redeveloping next to a freeway, that is a concern. We're approaching this from an economic angle. And the one study that's been done so far, the Kimley-Horn study, which was acting, as a rough estimate, a rough order of magnitude to say how much was the land worth, plugging into their formulas for what land values are next to freeways, next to railroad tracks, or not next to railroad tracks, they came up with a number of about $2 billion of increased value, and so that's what we're basing that off of. Smarter people than us can figure out what needs to be built where next to the freeway. And as part of the Kimley-Horn study, there was that number of 100 properties that do need to be taken. And I do have my issues every now and then with studies that are taken conservatively, like saying this is the biggest possible train configuration we can take, and it will require all these extra properties. And I do want to be very sensitive to that. And there are ways that in the final design, as studies happen, as people look at different options, that everything can be reduced. But it's like haggling, right? How much do you want for this gourd? You start with a high number and get it down lower. And that's the way projects work out eventually. So I'm sorry that sometimes big, scary numbers are used, but that's the process.
I think the gentleman behind you talk first. Yeah, but also on the development side of the house, throughout the United States and everything, there is development that goes up to the freeways, and that's going to happen. And businesses are going to say, yes, we can use that development, but we can also increase our green space there, and also just take people off the freeway too, in cars, because we're walking. Yes, sir.
Well, hi everybody. I'm Thomas. I live in Fair Park. Been a huge fan of the Rio Grande Plan since the beginning. But speaking of big, scary numbers, I'm worried based on the preliminary engineering report about the price tag, $3 to $5 billion. That sounds like a really heavy lift. So what I'm wondering is whether you guys have considered burying the front runner tracks first. So basically, if you just did that, left the Union Pacific tracks on the surface, you could build sort of a narrower and shorter structure, wouldn't need as much demolition. Our guy could rest easy at night. I'm sorry, what else was I going to say? I mean, if you look at Denver that you guys are citing, they did sort of a similar thing where they left the freight tracks on the surface, basically just rerouted grade-separated commuter traffic. So if you did something like that here, where people on the trains are still getting where they want to go, I feel like that could be a way to do it a lot cheaper. You'd be burying, 4 miles of track instead of the current 21. And the final thing I want to just mention, this talk about, burying all the tracks is necessary to connect east and west. It's relatively cheap and easy to get people across tracks, so I feel like a lot of this is really talking about moving cars. And so, I don't know. I feel like if a front runner only plan would give you the same sort of revitalization of the area, because I feel like what's important is having sort of a active central station rather than making the tracks disappear. And Denver's a good example of that too. So I don't know. I wonder if you'd be throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
So appreciate that. And those comments are great for the study. Those are perfectly, because the study is going to look at all that different things. As far as the big numbers are concerned, one thing I say about these big numbers is that the return on investment on these big numbers are big also. If you look at other projects, and I'm going to take a liberty here and talk about a gondola up a canyon. You take a gondola up a canyon, there is no return on investment for anybody but two entities. So there's very little return on investment there. Here, there's a huge return on investment. And that flow of traffic, just people and cars, is the big thing. And that's what the reconnecting study is all about, is reconnecting the communities so that all modes of transportation can easily move east and west across the city. So just thank you very much for any other comments. I just want to make sure we get everybody who else has comments. Anybody else does anybody else who hasn't spoken yet? Yes, sir, go ahead. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm Dan Potts. I'm Dan Potts. I'm a long-time educator at West High School, and I think the thing's great. But you guys missed two things. You haven't told us how many tracks are going to be down in Fifth West, number one. And a lot of those images had 1, 2, 3 tracks going down the thing. That's important. And also, you didn't say anything about one of our biggest peeves about, I think, 3 a.m. You guys all agree?
You mean the train horns that go off at 3 a.m. and wake everyone up? Hopefully there's no one down inside the train box that would need to be honked at. Otherwise, they have to do that.
My point is, will this resolve that sound issue?
If we get the trains off the surface where there are railroad crossings and put them where they are sealed off, separate, then yes, there would be no reason for them to blow their horns. The number of tracks changes based on which graphic we're using. That's a good observation, well spotted. We have different levels of design put in at different points. The Kimley Horn study came up with a different number of tracks for different allocations than we did. We figure at maximum there's enough space for 6 tracks. It could be less than that depending on how the geometry, utility configurations, everything works out. That's stuff for a later date. But the idea is that there would not need to be railroad tracks on the surface anymore. And the reason we want to get rid of all tracks on the surface is just because that's where the funding is. If we're going to get rid of all types of railroad crossings and reclaim land, then it's a much more enticing economic proposal than just getting rid of some of the tracks. So that's the goal to shoot for. But again, this is really early days. We'll see what comes from this when more experts put their eyes on it.
Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. My name is Tom Hamp. I'm from Dallas, Texas, on behalf of Eagle Materials, who is the parent company for Mountain Cement, of which has a terminal down on 615 West and 800. I have to applaud you for the amount of work that you put into this and just how it would change the community. And so it's forward thinking like that that's really going to drive the community, so I really applaud you there. I wonder, though, how much work went into, and I came here to find that out, and I think I've already heard that really there was no planning on how you'd service customers along that line. There is going to be some possible displacement. That site was the site of an old cement plant for over 100 years. We took ownership of that. As you guys might have seen, if you've driven by there, we've spent several $1 million demolitioning, cleaning it up, and preparing. We're in the midst of a modernization in Laramie, Wyoming, at our facility there, which services this. That is a significant investment. We've been in this community for a long, long time. We're going to remain as a supplier of cement in this community for a long time. And so I wonder how you've looked at it to make sure that we provide service for our facility.
So the answer I can say, at least on behalf of the city, is that we haven't yet. But that is something I was going to mention with the question about underutilized. If it's underutilized, right, why is it still there? The answer is customers exist there already, and so that's an important consideration. When the city did our technical study, our technical analysis, the Kimley-Horn study that's been mentioned a couple of times, what we looked at were really just the bare bones, kind of what would it take, what would it cost, what would it generate, very high level. It wasn't a deep dive just because the amount of funding we had was pretty nominal. So, and I guess this kind of goes to the takings question, right, which is something that the city rarely does, and part of it is because we just don't want to do that, right? It's we want the community to remain intact, and so if there are willing sellers, that's one thing. If there's not, what are mitigations? What are the things that we can do? And so in an instance like this, and with our study, for example, if we were to look at any rerouting of the existing UP line, it would also be looking at now how do existing customers get served. So that's something that's on our mind. We're not there yet, and so I don't have any answers for you at this point, but it is something that absolutely we would look at. It's, we aren't going to ignore that. Hopefully we can give you confidence in that. That's why we're slow.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And again, that goes back to the conversation, and when the study comes out, be in the list to make those comments. Because I realize that this is a grassroots plan and proposal, so a lot of these details are the reason why we have a city who does the study to make sure it has all the right pieces and achieves the vision that we want to achieve. So
thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Hey, thanks, guys. Councilman Pui had talked about some of the intergovernmental actors that are at play. What are some of the other ones outside of Wasatch Front Regional Council, Inland Port? Are there other ones that we should be aware of?
A UTA, because they run front runner tracks. Union Pacific, because they run the freight. Those are the two big players. Wasatch Front is our conduit for cities and municipalities and counties to get state funding and federal funding and work on big projects across our region, our Wasatch Front region, Utah County up to Davis County.
Right on. Thanks.
Sure.
Hi, my name is James. I live in Sandy, actually, and I've talked to people in the Via Rio Grande or over Instagram so I've talked to my congressman about this plan. And one thing that he said, this is his opinion, is that the Rio Grande Plan is something that is more suited for people that live in Salt Lake, and it's going to benefit people in Salt Lake. But from what this conversation, this meeting, it seems that you guys need state support, and you also need support from the Wasatch Front Regional Council. And so whenever I talked to you guys about that, you mentioned that, this plan will potentially help rail reliability for rail across the community. And so my question is, do you guys have any modeling or estimation that proves that, with or without the Rio Grande Plan, we would have this level of reliability or that level of reliability? Because I don't really feel like that kind of thing is very tangible to people, especially congressmen that are not from Salt Lake City.
So
Sure. Either way. The transportation system that we're talking about here is definitely regional and national in some cases in nature. So that would be a whole part of this study. It's part of why the federal government funds such a study, is because it really has a significance that is above above and beyond just Salt Lake City locals, right? And so in that regard, yes, we would consider those regional, statewide, and national impacts. it would be part of making the case for funding. Certainly, we couldn't fund something like this locally or even at the state level. It would require outside entities and honestly a whole lot of voices and power, because Union Pacific, remember that they were there first. And so we have to make the case why they should bother to cooperate with us if there's any inconvenience, cost, anything else for them. So that's part of the case.
So also your question about this is a Salt Lake City and only Salt Lake City will benefit. And I kind of pushed back on that because as a capital city, the capital city development and the capital city economy has tentacles that cross the whole state. Mm-hmm. And so if you also have more reliability, Union Pacific and rail through our city, it's going to also filter down. So anything that's coming from the inland port or anywhere from Oakland and it's going down to Cedar City and it comes through our city, that reliability comes through our city. Also, just people coming into our city, our population doubles every day. Yeah. People coming in here. Now you get out of the Rio Grande, you walk downtown, you don't even have your car. So there's a benefit for not just the city to bring east and west commerce, which then benefits everybody else, but also people coming into the city from outside the city also will benefit that. So there is a bigger benefit, and part of that is, and probably, again, about the imagination, probably even benefits that we're not even seeing right now.
I'll just give one more anecdotal example of the evidence. The front runner goes from Ogden through Salt Lake and all the way to Provo. It covers the Wasatch Front. That's about 80 to 90% of the population of the state. And when there's a crossing disruption, the train service, I mean, the part where there's the crossing service has like a bus bridge, and that really disrupts the way you can use the front runner. And I took it upon myself to study where are most of these interruptions happening. Where are people having grade crossing interactions with the trains, whether that's a close call or whether that's an actual hit or strike or fatality. Having been a UTA train host myself, I know the training procedures for that when someone gets struck. It's a 2 or 3 hour delay at least while the police figure out exactly how the person got hit by a train. And for all that time, the front runner's just down. So whatever peak period it is when the person gets hit, that you just can't count on the train anymore. And that's for the whole line, north or south. About half of the strikes that I've been documenting over the last 5 years or so have happened at the crossings downtown near the Rio Grande project area. And if you can eliminate half of the disruptions of service that happen to front runner, you make it twice as reliable as it is now, just based on pedestrian interactions. That's something that benefits the entire Wasatch Front, the entire state. So we can put together more strong numbers on that. But that's just one way that we feel the Rio Grande Plan is for a way that benefits the entire state population, not just those capital city liberals.
Okay, thank you.
So we got probably time for maybe 2 more comments, and then we probably got a call to go.
She can go.
So yeah, Cameron.
Is it bad for the pollution?
Very good question. So thank you. So the Rio Grande Plan actually would be good for the air quality in that we would not have traffic stopped, and we could actually have people also walking and biking to work and going east and west. And our buses would also be able to go from east and west, and they wouldn't have to stop. So there would be less cars on the road than there are now. So that would be good for the pollution. Also, on the train side of the house, the Union Pacific trains, when they would come through Salt Lake City, they could actually keep a better speed. So they would also be flowing through the area and not being on their brakes, which also causes pollution. So it would actually improve our air quality, because we'd have more people in the downtown area who could walk and bike to places to eat and to restaurant and to go play than if they were in their car. So very good question, and that is also one of the reasons why we want to do this, is so that we can have people travel outside of their car to different places. So very good question. Thank you.
I'm a business owner and I'm also a property owner, so I really appreciate that we had people that are also in that position show up here today to talk about their problems. A business should be serving obviously its customers, but it also should serve its local community, and I think the community should serve its businesses. So my question is, why not, if there are businesses that are affected by this, that we get together as a community and support those businesses?
Thank you.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Ted Knowlton. I'm with the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and I just wanted to note. A lot of people don't really know what Wasatch Front Regional Council is. The basic story of WFRC is we serve our member local governments, our cities and counties, and that includes Salt Lake City, it includes Salt Lake County. And on the council is both the name of the organization and it's the name of the board that makes our decisions. And that is county commissioners, mayors. It includes Mayor Mendenhall. It includes Council Member Dugan. I just want everybody to know that. We are super curious about this project. We are completely open-minded and love the fact that it is coming up from the grassroots. And I just want to note that we are a complete partner on the Reconnecting Communities project, and we're very excited about digging into this and many other ideas about how we can improve the connections across Salt Lake City. I just wanted to note that and would certainly welcome any questions you've got about our process and would love any comments that you want to provide us. So thank you.
Thank you, Ted. And I want to point out that the Wasatch Front Regional Council, WFRC, goes deep. They have a lot of engineers. They look at everything from all different angles, and they're nonpartisan in the way. They're going to take the best avenue with the best details they have and make that decision. And they're making decisions or making recommendations to the municipalities on decisions to how to spend the money and how to do that across the whole region. They're not just looking at Salt Lake City, they're looking across the area, and they do it very well, and they have membership across the city. So we always lean on WFRC for their expertise, and I appreciate your involvement here. And so we got to call it a night. We got to wrap it up here. So thank you very much for the conversation. Keep the conversation, keep the dialogue going. It's important. When Julianne and the study comes out, get online, go in person, make your comments, make your recommendation, make your ideas heard, because that's important. And also, go to train stops, whatever it is, and report your block crossings.
FRA.gov/blocked crossings.
Holy cow. See, copy all that one down real quick. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great night.